I hand painted this 3D printed Vaznev with the LA Thieves blueprint. And after I posted it, the weirdest things started happening. My Twitter kept showing this sketchy dude. My project list would glitch out. And then this message appeared on my phone. Do Boston Breach. Signed, definitely not Boston Breach. Okay. So I got to work. After printing, here is what we have. It's a solid print, but we still need to do some work before we get to painting. And when Boston Breach reached out to me, they wanted 2 of these made. So I'll be prepping both at the same time. We start here, as always, with sanding. And I'm starting with 80 grit sandpaper and give it a good rough up. Then for the really bad spots, I use Bondo spot putty. And if you want more info on these processes, you can check out this M4 video where I go over all of them. I mainly use the Bondo on the stock and the handle of these. After it dries, I sand again with 180 and 280 grit sandpaper. Then I wash it off and I hit it with a filler primer that just fills any remaining layer lines. One more round of sanding, and then it's time for the black primer. This will also act as our base. Now to get to the fun part, starting the paint job. With how complex this blueprint is, I need to start by sketching out a bunch of the elements. Then I start painting the easiest part of the build, which for me was the handle, and I just wanted to get a little fun with it. So I used a few different blue colors and then some red, and then it was time to really start on the bulk of the elements. I paint a base undercoat with off-white. This has a lot better coverage than just straight up white, and it will make whatever I paint on top of it pop way more, which is exactly what I'm doing here with the green on the X. I also do a straight up white on top of this because we want this to really pop out. Next, I go back to the handle and I do the graffiti style breach. I kind of did some ADHD on this. You'll see I go back and forth quite a bit, but it's just my process. Next up was to do the undercoat and the green parts of the main character. And then I moved to the stock, which is really just a few different blues that I blend together. And I think it turned out pretty cool. With that drying, I start with the next piece of the model and I decide to go with the mag here. I do some undercoating and then of course the green on top of it. And while that is drying, I hit several spots of the model with red. Once again, wait for all of that to dry, and then it's time to move on to our next part, which is the cityscape. And this takes a bulk of our time. I have to mimic a spray paint texture here. I didn't want to just spray it, and I don't have an airbrush, so I had to make do with what we have, which is paintbrushes. So I did a mixture of dabbing on the surface and also dry brushing. I did some circular motions here. I did some dabbing. Just a mixture of that really helped do a smooth gradient from green to black. I think it turned out pretty nice and I'm happy with it. So then we move on to the second half of the cityscape, and it's the blue section. It's a similar process here. We do need to fade it to black, but there's also a lot of blues here. So I use like 6 or 7 types of blues, and there was a bit of trial and error here just to get the right ones and the right gradient. But at the end of it, I think it was pretty good. Now with the backgrounds all dry and out of the way, it's time to actually work on the cityscape. And there's 2 rows of buildings here. So we're going to start on the ones in the background first. And they are the larger ones, which is kind of an interesting thing in this design, but that's how it is. And so that's what we got to do. So we paint full black first, and then we do a few different layers of blue washes on top of it. And this just gives it like a hazy kind of texture and helps it fade into the background a little bit. The foreground is really just straight up black buildings, which is just a bunch of boxes, different shapes, sizes, try to give some variation in there. And this is on the green and the blue side. Now that we're super happy with that, we move on to the next part, which if we misstep, could ruin the whole thing. We have to do a drop shadow for the next part, which is a strong typeface logo. This is my absolute worst nightmare. I hate painting out lettering. I have terrible handwriting, and this has just like always been a thorn in my side while painting stuff. So I'm always looking for a better solution, and I think I found one here. I started with a recreation of the logo in my computer on Illustrator. Then I send that to my little vinyl cutter, and this is how you would make a vinyl decal for like a water bottle or a window. But I do the opposite of what you would do there. Instead of removing all of the background material, I leave that and I take out what would be the actual sticker. So all of the letters and all of that stuff, I take that out. And what we're left with is the perfect little stencil that will stick right to the surface. I paint over it with some watered down white, and it's a little bit messy, but it's exactly what we need to just give us the guide, and we just have to touch up some areas and then make it super bold. After a 30-hour paint job, we are finally left with this. I hope you enjoyed the build, and if you did, please hit that like button. It helps spread this video out to more people, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next one.